The country's in the very best of hands. The best of hands. The best of hands.
You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back to Where You Live. I'm Gene Sullivan, broadcasting from the True North Painting Studios. The show is brought to you by American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency, and Extreme Exteriors. Before we wrap up our first story here about people shutting off the water for people that aren't paying in the city of Detroit, let me tell our listeners we've got a free gift for you. We put together a bi-monthly newsletter called What's New. A lot of what we talk about on the show, we talk in further detail. Folks that we have on the show are also contributors and writers to that newsletter. People say it's a great resource. If you would like to start receiving yours free, give us a call during the week at New Concepts at 952-922-2500. Ask for Lori. She'll make sure that you start receiving your copy either electronically or by mail. Well, as I mentioned, there are these three groups that identified themselves as the Detroit People's Water Board, the Food and Water Watch, and the Blue Planet Project. They sent a letter to the United Nations, and they said, you've got to intervene. And they said, here is why. They said, this is a deliberate plot that has been planned for the exploitation of minorities. Some very serious charges. And now they're laying out how they know that this is a deliberate plot. First of all, they said they say there are four things that have taken place, and this has happened over a period of decades. So apparently there's some mastermind that's been in charge of this for over 4 decades. Because they said, number one, the first shock that took place and that struck Detroit was over the last 4 decades, the flight of corporations toward cheaper overseas labor, the movement of white, wealthier Detroiters to the suburbs, draining the city's tax base. So they said this was a deliberate ploy by rich white people to purposely get out of Dodge, or in this case, Detroit, and try to destroy the city. They said, number two, this has been a plot because it's something that they say the media, corporations, and right-wing politicians have drummed up a crisis of fear about financial debt. That's quite interesting that they put those three groups together, because I do not know that they necessarily all have characteristically ever been considered working hand in hand, but according to these groups, they are. And they say that there is a specific purpose that they're trying to an attempt to dismantle the public resources in the city. They say, number three, what's taking place is they say that the third shock that's taking place is the use of physical violence. They say what's happening now is that whoever's the mastermind is now using physical violence by way of the police in Detroit, forcing the police to take violent action against these disadvantaged groups with the intent to dampen their will and finally their resistance. And they say, fourth, what is going to be taking place is the removal of democracy. Can you believe that? And what do they point to, saying what is the removal of democracy in Detroit? Well, if you remember, they say that there is a person who the governor has put in place who is an emergency manager. Now, why did the governor of Michigan put an emergency manager over the city of Detroit? Well, if you remember, it's about a year ago, the city of Detroit filed for bankruptcy. And any time you file for bankruptcy, the first thing is that there is a trustee that's assigned in any bankruptcy. And why do you have a trustee? You want someone who's going to make sure that they're going to be responsible for the assets of that entity and making sure that things are taken care of. So what this group is looking at is through a different pair of glasses that I think a lot of other people normally have. I don't think that a majority of the folks think it is inappropriate. If you can't pay your bill, you don't get the service. You can't say, well, I don't have the money for gas, but you should give me the gas for free, gas station. I should get the water for free, even though it costs other people money to make sure that it is clean and make sure that it's pumped underground and comes up where I want it to in my home. It's not the government that's blocking people off from fresh rivers and streams saying you can't have water. They're saying we've provided infrastructure here you need to pay for. If you don't pay for your electricity, guess what? It gets cut off. And so what we're talking about here is something that is not really a masterminded plot by some insidious group trying to wreck and undermine other people. But it's really sad to see this kind of thing take place. I've always noticed over the years how unfortunate it is that the more a situation becomes full of bitterness and acrimony, the less efforts are used by those who dissent in working on a solution of the problem, but instead would rather see those that oppose them fully crushed and humiliated. It would seem to me that it would be much better for them to take half the energy that they have been demonstrating to work together with the other citizens in Detroit to try and come up with a solution. And those are words that I think could be heeded by homeowner associations as well.